So, today I'm going to be telling you everything you either thought you knew or anything that you might not know about vaping and e-cigarettes. Okay, more tinka, as you can see there. Then there's some images of topics we'll be covering today. So, we'll start with the basics. What is vaping? Most people, uneducated people, would just say, it's just puffing in some water vapor smoke, in and out. I mean, there's nothing to it, it's harmless. Well, it's actually puffing an aerosol. This is the actual definition, is puffing an aerosol through a vaping device or a similar device like that. And sometimes, if you go on social media sites, Instagram, you see them on Snapchat, Twitter, they're on YouTube, people post tutorials or videos of themselves doing tricks with the smoke that comes out of them. Whenever they blow them out, they can do like certain tricks. And it's believed to be a viable solution to the tobacco epidemic, which has been going on in the country since about the 1980s. Teen smoking's been a huge issue, and then once this came around, teen smoking went down, but this also went up, and this isn't helping with the nicotine epidemic, but we're going to cover that a little bit later. So where did it begin? The idea of smoking started whenever Christopher Columbus first arrived in the Americas. This is when the Europeans got exposed to it. When he arrived, the Native Americans, or the Indians at this time, who had already been living here, already had tobacco and tobacco plants, and then once they arrived, they showed the Europeans how to like roll cigarettes and stuff like that, and they actually started smoking back then because even then they had pipes and everything like that. So as centuries went on after Columbus arrived in America, smoking became more of a business and an enterprise, and it became more profitable rather than just like a way of friendship or showing new people who were new to the land something that they had already been participating in. And a 1964 report from Surgeon General, after these centuries had already been going on, after this report, it was showed that smoking leads to lung cancer. There was like a direct link in that, but the study specifically said about men. It didn't say anything about women, but I'm sure that that's pretty applicable to the situation for both women and men. And by the time 2000 rolled around, smoking was prohibited in places like restaurants, hospitals, any public place in most of the 50 states. So, 2003, the first e-cigarette was made by a 52-year-old pharmacist named Han Lick. He made it in his laboratory in Beijing, China. His father had recently passed away. He was a smoker for all of his life, and he wanted this to be the solution to helping people not die like his father did as a result of what he did for the most of his life, which was smoking. So the company that originally made these e-cigarettes was called Golden Dragon Holdings at the time, and after it released in 2003, it was changed to Ruyan, and Ruyan is, it didn't specify a language, but it does mean like smoke, and that's Han Lick there, and then that's it's kind of hard to see down here, but he's holding the e-cigarette that he made. There was no specific name given, he didn't name it or anything, it was just the first e-cigarette that was commercially successful, because there were others made before him, but he made the one that was the most successful and the most heard about, unlike the ones that were made between the 80s and the 2000s before this. So, the reception. This e-cigarette became a huge success in the Eastern Hemisphere, and in April of 2006, sales all over Europe began. And after this had been going on in Europe for some time, the sales then opened to America in August of 2006, and then towards the end of August was the first time that e-cigarettes actually came to port in the United States on board a cargo ship. So, not every country was as open to this as maybe the European countries and the US. The World Health Organization, WHO, it deemed e-cigarettes as not being an actual smoking cessation aid. Cessation means like quitting smoking, so like if you ever hear that term, it just means about quitting. And countries such as Turkey, Hong Kong, Canada, Panama, and Australia banned the sale and import of these e-cigarettes. It started with Turkey in about 2008, and then as the years went on, it was over a span of like probably 4 or 5 years. It went to Hong Kong, Canada, Panama, and then Australia. In 2009, President Obama signed the Family Smoking Protection and Tobacco Control Act, which we will refer to later as the FSP-TCA. It comes up again because this started a very interesting thing with the FDA regulations on e-cigarettes and vaping devices. The other products that took off as a result of this e-cigarette being made in 2003, it was Views, which was started by R.J. Reynolds in 2013, and then that's one of their products right there. Blue was started by Jason Healy in 2009. Most of you, if you heard of like the original ones that were the most successful here, you probably heard of Blue more because even still, these are still around, but these were the first ones that were mainly popularized in the United States. Juul. If you don't know what Juul is, you've been living under a rock for the past 3 years. It is extremely popular today all over this country, especially in youth, which the reason it's bolded is because we're going to come back to that a lot because of the fact with all these teenagers getting into nicotine and stuff like that. We're going to come back to that. And then SMOC, which was started by IVPS Technology Corporation in 2010. It is, and this is why I have the little asterisk there, it is known as the centerpiece of the vaping industry because of the fact that it's released so many things. Like there's stick mods, box mods, stuff like that. These are some of the sticks. And then for Juul, again, if you don't know what a Juul looks like, you've been living under a rock. So this video is going to help take us into the next slide. It's a message from the Juul CEO, and like I said, when it had to do with teenagers' access to having these devices, this is the main video I wanted to show.
Our mission at Juul Labs is to improve the lives of the world's 1 billion smokers and eliminate cigarettes. While working towards our mission, an unintended serious problem has developed: underage usage of our product. Our intent was never to have youth use Juul, but they are. As the industry leader, we must lead the category in decreasing underage use. Today, we announced an action plan to do just that. For us to successfully fulfill our mission of helping adult smokers, we must be trusted, and we must earn that trust. That starts with action, not words. We thank Commissioner Gottlieb for his leadership in this area, and we look forward to working with the FDA to solve this issue on an industry-wide basis. Youth usage is a serious problem, and we are committed to solving it.
Okay, so one of the names that you did hear pop up was Gottlieb. That is the commissioner of the FDA. And if you read any articles, because Mr. Bowser, for health, he would pull up health articles that have to do with this sometimes to read before class. And if you saw Gottlieb, you'd know that was the commissioner of the FDA. So, controversy. Oh God, there's a ton. So, the FSP-TCA was passed by Obama, and it required all e-cigarette and vaping brands to submit health claims to the FDA in accordance with that act. So, as a result of this, many of the claims that were filed by these companies were actually falsified, or they were stretching the truth, and it caused large outrage in the population that wants to end this amongst teens because of the appeal. And it was also found not to be a viable cessation aid. So the claims that these devices are supposed to help stop smoking aren't necessarily totally untrue, but it's a hard stretch to try to make. So another big controversy, and you see these, or you hear about this all the time whenever you hear this topic, is that these ads may be targeting children, well, not young children, but like teenagers, with fruit flavors, candy flavors, anything that's not like typical menthol, anything like that. And then because of this, it's feared that vaping will actually lead to more teenagers reversing the process, going back into cigarette smoking, which is the total opposite of what's intended. Not even for teenagers, because again, from the video, teenagers aren't even supposed to be able to have like this kind of free access to this. It's specifically for adults to try to quit smoking, and this is reversing the process. And then here's another video, which we're going to talk about this a bit, is the controversy with children being able to have free access to this and what it's doing to them.
Up next, the Real has a very important message for parents.
Yes.
According to CBS News, a new report from the American Lung Association claims that U.S. health officials are not doing enough to protect kids and teens from the dangers of tobacco and electronic cigarettes. The report claims that teen vaping has become an epidemic, up 78% over last year.
Wow.
Companies are marketing these addictive products to young kids, saying that they're safer than actual cigarettes, even offering a variety of flavors like cotton candy. However, many doctors are warning that some e-cigs products actually contain more nicotine than cigarettes, and that they're not safe at all. Tam,
Yes.
I know the kids are really still young, but does this report alarm you at all as a new
Yes,
as a
and
parent?
it's very scary. And what I don't like is, this company is actually preying on younger people, young adults, because of the packaging. When you look at the packaging, it looks like you're buying jelly beans. It's very, colorful, and the reality is that there's more nicotine in one pod than there is an entire pack of cigarettes. And these young kids, these teens or young adults, when they're smoking this because it tastes like blueberry donut, they're not truly realizing the true effects. And I love the way Europe handles their packaging. They actually will put a black lung on the cover of the cigarette packaging, or put a woman with the hole in her throat. We need to see more of those commercials actually talking about the reality of smoking these things. It's not like they're making it look like it's just really cool and really fun. So that's why it's alarming and scary to me as a parent.
No, it makes a total sense. And it is distracting when you go to Europe and you see those images.
Yeah,
so
kind of makes
dark
you
and
think
so
for
real.
a second.
I know. Obviously, that's such a big thing in LA, and having been around it, I do notice that it's actually not only the more nicotine in each pod, but it's also so convenient that, unlike a smoker where you have to step outside and smoke, you gotta make sure nobody's around, you gotta make sure, I don't know if you have to smell later on, you wanna be careful, but then you can just do it anywhere, and that is a caveat that makes it really hard to quit, even if you're trying to,
The brands also, you have to understand something. A young person's brain is still developing until they're 25. So you have to remind teenagers that they may think that they're grown, but they're not, all right? That's the first thing. Second thing is some brands contain chemicals like formaldehyde, antifreeze, and all of this can be cancerous. So if you're gonna talk to your children, talk to them about the dangers of smoking it. Other states, they need to also push up the age. In California, it's 21 to even smoke an e-cigarette. A lot of states are at 18, so I think they need to push up the age and just warn them of, this is not good. It may taste like cereal, but it's not cereal.
Yeah.
It's really addictive, and it's
good.
worse than a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah, I have friends that smoke hookah, and I think they don't realize that nicotine is still in there, and it's highly addictive.
Yeah.
And I just heard a commercial that they did the other day on our stations out here in LA that actually say that smoking hookah is like smoking 100 cigarettes.
Yeah.
In one sitting, which you never think about that because it comes in all the fun flavors, apple, mint, but that is literally like sitting down and smoking 100 cigarettes, and again, it is highly addictive, and people don't realize it when they're fiending to go smoke these vapes and these hookahs. So it is really important that we let parents out there know that it's very dangerous. Yeah.
Yes, parents, grown-ups, everybody.
Everybody.
Be safe out there. We love you guys.
So, as you can see there, it discusses very largely the effect that this is having on children, and again, reversing the process about getting teens off of smoking devices. So, as we go on, this survey is a bit disturbing. Whenever I came across it, whenever I was looking on EBSCOhost, this was what I pulled up. So, there was a study done with about 44,000, almost 45,000 US seniors, sophomores, and 8th graders. the usage in 12th graders jumped about 9% from 2017 to 2018. All results you'll see here from 17 to 18. So 10th graders almost totally doubled, which is very alarming. And then even in 8th graders, it jumped up 2.6%, which still is pretty concerning because they are America's youth, and if they keep this and they keep that addiction going, if they do have an addiction and it goes on to when they're older, what could their kids be like, and then what could their kids be like, and so on. So that was just with vaping alone. This is with marijuana and cannabis vaping, which this is basically a whole different aspect, because this is basically the same as smoking, more or less different than vaping. So 12th graders, this jumped from 4.9% to 7.5%, which with the drug epidemic and with the Just Say No program that Nancy Reagan talked about in the 1980s, it's very alarming to see that these percentages are jumping back up, and you never want to see that, especially if you're a parent or an adult. You wouldn't want to see something like that. And then even 10th graders, they jumped back up. They almost doubled again, and it jumped about 2.7%, which again, even with all these, 4.9 to 7.5, 4.3 to 7, 1.6 to 2.6 in 8th graders, you never want to see that whatsoever, because it makes you concerned for what the future could be for these kids, for their kids, just the future of the country in general, even all around the world too. It's alarming. So what's being done? This is a question I believe that a lot of adults and teachers, parents, everyone will ask, is what's being done about this, because obviously it's growing and it's not stopping. So the FDA is imposing stronger age regulations around sales. The video that we had watched with the women sitting at the table discussing it, they talked about the fact that California raised their age from 18 to 21, and a bunch of other states are doing that. Kentucky did that, I believe. It was either Kentucky or Virginia, and Mitch McConnell, who is in Congress from Kentucky, actually is pushing for them to increase it to 21 everywhere, because he has a very strong stance on this. So, Juul Labs has paused manufacturing of certain flavors. Obviously, you're still going to see your menthol, everything else, but they got rid of a lot of the candy, like these sweet flavors that teenagers find so appealing, from convenience stores, gas stations, supermarkets, wherever you see them sold. However, if you do go online, these are still available. I'm not encouraging you guys to do this, I'm just saying that that's still there. So the FDA also threatened to remove all e-cigarette products everywhere as a result of this, because they're genuinely scared for the fact that so many young people are getting their hands on this. They are extremely concerned, as they should be, because again, with the survey I showed you, those percentages are still jumping, they're not going down. And initiatives were set up, such as the Real Cost and Truth. They are putting ads, posters, TV, news. You see them everywhere. This lovely little thing right here, that poster, I guarantee you if you walk into the bathroom, you'll either see it on the wall or sitting in the back of a urinal, as I see most of them are, because of the fact some teenagers regard this, some teenagers disregard this. It's just a matter of who you talk to, but again, they are trying to do something, but in my opinion, I think they need to try a bit harder. So, another form of controversy. This is a story, this is an actual news story I pulled up, and I was a bit disturbed when I found it. This is William Brown. He was from Texas. He was about 22 when he passed away. He wanted to go into town. He was going to buy a vape pen. He borrowed his grandmother's town car. I'm just giving you the background here. He went into the store, bought the pen, came back out from the store, and sat down in his car. He went to use the pen, and the pen exploded during the use, and metal shards from the vape itself were sent into his face and neck, and he died in the hospital 2 days later. His cause of death was a stroke that was brought on by the fact that he had a severed carotid artery in his neck from the metal shards. And this is pretty scary, because 2,000 vape pen explosions causing severe second and third degree burns just from 2015 to 17 alone, it makes you wonder like how safe really are they, regardless of the fact, not even counting in nicotine and everything, how safe really are they? So after hearing about this, I had a question that I posed to myself. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, and the atomizer, which I think I'm pronouncing that right, is positioned in the vape. It's about right here, somewhere in here, because it has to heat the e-liquid that you pour into the vape. And that atomizer is right above the battery that is in there, and the batteries usually in these devices are lithium batteries, and it's very known that all batteries are combustible if they're around hot sources. So the atomizer being directly above the battery is that probable cause for all these explosions that I talked about from these pens, from the fact of the heat from the atomizer and the battery interacting, the combustibility. Is that correct? I researched, I found a couple of case studies, I found a couple of articles that were written, and it was a yes. Most of the explosions that I did read about were actually due to battery heat complications. And then this is basically a device. So we're going to go through here. There's the atomizer that I discussed. It's right there. And then here's where you have your liquid. And then here's the battery. They're not too far apart. Obviously, that's going to get hot from it being used. That's going to get hot just to heat the liquid. So those two being hot around each other is extremely high combustibility. And that's a very serious issue. So, the Hungary study in 2015, it was conducted with about 1,600 people almost, and they were all 18 or older. Of these people, 82.4% of them were e-cigarette users, and then that other fraction of that 100% was a mix of lone cigarette users and people who use e-cigarettes and cigarettes, which that doesn't make any sense to me because it was supposed to be getting off of cigarettes and onto e-cigarettes because it's supposed to be better. So that actually really confuses me. So most of the people that they surveyed reported using their e-cigarettes like 10, 15 times a day. But there were a few that reported about 20 times a day, and we're not talking about like hitting a vape 20 times a day, because some people that's common. We're talking about like actual cigarettes basically. And from the studies, again, I have no idea how, but some of the people reported improved breathing, which very strongly confuses me because this really messes up your lungs. That does not make any sense to me. However, memory function did dip, and that's very talked about, is the fact of how nicotine and those other chemicals interact with your brain if they stunt your brain growth in general. And overall, the study results seem somewhat positive, which I have no idea how. I disagree with that, but this is the OFWW study. So this study was done 2 years after the Hungary study, and it was done on female mice. So they were exposed to the chemicals from the vapes before they were mating, and then they had them mate. These mice continued to have these chemicals exposed to them, or even like vaped during pregnancy, and these babies were born. They seemed born normal, but after they had developed a bit, it was shown that they had asthma, and then a follow-up study was done immediately after for human cells, and they exposed those to the chemicals, and it decreased cell respiration quality, which is a huge, vital, important part of our body, and it also decreased mitochondrial function, which is bad because we need that energy. So the health effects. This is what you always see plastered everywhere whenever they talk about vaping. Nicotine addiction is a serious thing. It affects your brain, it affects growth, everything. Whenever you have the withdrawal, as most smokers did, because back then, before these e-cigarettes came out, they tried to just immediately go cold turkey, which is just cutting right off from the cigarettes, because there was no alternatives really back then besides maybe the patch or Nicorette gum. And now that these are around, the withdrawal symptoms got a bit worse, especially in teenagers. Most if not a lot of teenagers don't already have these issues, this just gets increased by the withdrawal of nicotine from the body. Anxiety, depression, mood swings, cravings, and insomnia. These are anxiety and depression are two very big issues, especially with our generation now. It's a bit less common in the adults you'll find now, but mostly in the teenagers now, they either are diagnosed with these, self-diagnosed. Regardless, it's concerning because it can increase that, and that's not a good thing. Even e-cigarettes on their own, not including the nicotine, can cause coughing, popcorn lung, which is just shortness of breath that's caused by a chemical that's in popcorn. It's also in the e-liquid and stuff like that, and it also causes fevers. Common misconceptions. They're not the same as cigarettes because they don't produce tobacco smoke. This is a lot of, whenever people try to defend it to adults or anyone like that, this is a point they'll try to make. It's actually false. These devices actually contain some of the same chemicals as cigarettes, most of them. And then no secondhand smoke. This, in this case, is correct, but scientists haven't yet done studies to demonstrate any effects of secondhand smoke or how that works. And I really wanted to emphasize secondhand smoke because whenever I was a small child, I spent a lot of time around my grandmother. She smoked a lot, so the secondhand smoke concept really interests me about this device. Just to recap, this is an advancement because cigarettes were more widely used until about the 2000s, and then they became electronicized after that 1964 study and the following studies that came. It was to help eliminate some of that tobacco smoke risk. So these cigarettes are not as effective as tobacco, but it still has its effects on the body. Like obviously tobacco is going to be a lot worse, tar, etc. These won't cause tar, but it still has negative health effects. It also burdens the others that may be around the user of the e-cigarette. It burdens them less, but at the same time, it's still a little bit disgruntling. And it drove down teen smoking, but honestly, for what? I mean, you saw the survey, you saw that study that they did with all the percentages increasing from a 2-year period. It drove down the smoking rates about 50-60%, but really for what? And then here's a little timeline for the e-cigarettes. It's kind of hard to see, but why did I choose this? Okay, so this is where a bit of personal history came in for me. My grandmother had a tumor in her nose from smoking for all of her life, from the tobacco smoke interacting with her, and obviously negative health effects, just like these vaping devices. I've had at least 6 immediate family members pass on from complications due to smoking. My cousin currently has colorectal cancer, which is complications from smoking. He smoked all his life until he got the diagnosis. My uncle has prostate cancer. He used to smoke when he was younger. What I'm trying to say with these is the risk never really leaves you. You can quit. My uncle's been clean for 20-25 years from smoking, but the risk never leaves you. These, and even now, these chemicals, because the same chemicals are in these vapes and in whatever e-cigarette vape device anyone may have, these chemicals are still in here and they don't leave that easy. They stick around, and obviously some of these, it shows that they stick around for a while. My aunt smoking, she still smokes to this day. COPD, emphysema, they're very difficult things that have to do with your lungs and how you breathe, and it's very bad. There's no other way to say it. It's just awful. And this gave me a strong moral urge to help and educate on what could happen to people who do this, because I felt an urge, at least from my family's history. And then these are the ribbons for the cancers. My opinion on this. Obviously, a lot of people know what this is. It's widely known. I thought it was a pretty basic topic. No offense. So, my stance on this was I wasn't necessarily opposed to this, but I believe to each their own. What are you going to do? I tried to convince my grandma 10 times to stop smoking in her lifetime, never worked once, so to each their own. I mean, you're not going to really be able to fully stop someone. After the research, this is a bit of a cliche, but I found it very interesting. But I don't mean that as just to say that. I honestly with the stuff I read, whether it was the case studies from the vape pens exploding, the fact that they used human cells, mice, what have you, to do these studies, I found it very intriguing, and I found it to have a lot of great information that I wanted to present. Any personal questions that I had or personal unknowns, they were solved by reading some of these studies and articles, such as the battery and the atomizer being so close together, those explosions. That was a big question that I actually had, and I'm not just making that up. Deeper information, you see those posters in the bathrooms like the ones we have here, and it goes over a lot of the stuff. Like these things have chromium, lead, everything in them. Like it just details some of the bad things that are in there, and you see them all over here. But if you go on to read these things, there's a lot of deeper information than what you see on these posters in the bathrooms or the commercials that are on TV. There's more to it than just what you see on media. And then stance. I still believe to each their own, because I mean, who are people really to tell other people what to do with that and have it expect it to work immediately? But my supportiveness of it has strongly wavered. And then societal benefits. There isn't any necessarily societal benefits, but this topic still has room to grow, so I'm not ruling anything out. This might help the secondhand smoke concept, but until these scientists do these studies to help learn about secondhand smoke and how it goes through these devices, we're not going to know. If people can actually use this correctly, maybe there's a chance that the cessation opinion turns around from it not being an aid to it being an aid. It depends. Again, there's still more time. And then again, teen use, now more than ever, needs to be kept in check. It's going to be difficult, but it needs to be somehow. These initiatives and these companies need to do a better job, or just increase their efforts in general, just to keep that going. It's still a young concept, as I discussed, and then time is needed to make a true decision on whether this could have any benefits to anyone whatsoever. And these are my references.